communities of color, which have experienced some of the highest rates of overdose deaths in the state. As this emergency has stolen the lives of thousands of residents, the state of Illinois has been a national leader in fighting back. I want to recognize the role of Attorney General Kwame Raoul in shaping this legacy of leadership, working to ensure justice for Illinoisans from Cairo to Danville to Rockford to Chicago. Illinois residents will be safer and healthier thanks to the strong commitment and painstaking work of the Attorney General and his team. After years of litigation, including more than 4,000 lawsuits filed by state and local government officials, including by our Attorney General, accountability is finally arriving. Today, we join together to announce the framework through which our state's residents will see the benefits of Illinois' opioid litigation, which could total as much as $760 million over the next 18 years. Countless hours have been dedicated to listening to the needs of municipalities, people in recovery, families that have lost their loved ones to overdose, and those currently struggling with opioid use disorder up and down the state of Illinois. That work ensures that these funds truly address the best interventions, prevention, and remediation for the communities hurt by these harms. Over the last 3 years, I've sought to bring new scale to the fight against the opioid crisis. I've made it so that clinics and hospitals can now receive no-cost naloxone through our Access Narcan project, ensuring that at-risk patients can have the supplies right as they leave the healthcare system. Community-based partners, including police, sheriffs, firefighters, and harm reduction organizations, also have access to naloxone through this project to enable them to save more lives across Illinois. Overdose education and naloxone distribution services have been expanded, delivering more than 65,000 kits in FY 2021 and over 97,000 kits in FY 2022. More people have access to recovery homes so people can have safe, stable places to live in the early stages of their journey. And our 24/7 Illinois helpline continues to connect patients to emergency response, interventions, treatment, and recovery services. In addition, earlier this year, I announced the State of Illinois Overdose Action Plan to bring all that work together under one umbrella, furthering our mission with an even greater commitment to bring recovery to every community. From the settlement funds that we are announcing today will advance that plan to its fullest extent, leaving no stone unturned as we work to bring the opioid epidemic to an end. In a few moments, I'll sign an executive order ensuring that dollars go exactly where they should, fueling a whole-of-government approach toward getting help in the hands of those who need it most. This executive order establishes an Office of Opioid Settlement Administration and cements a framework for making the best use of these new resources. It builds on the substantial work of Illinois' existing opioid steering committee, led jointly by the Lieutenant Governor, Juliana Stratton, the Department of Human Services, and the Department of Public Health. There are so many ways that people who end up in a struggle with the disease that is addiction, self-medicating, trauma, simultaneous mental health challenges, a pain prescription gone wrong. But no matter what brings someone to that place, their life is worth saving. If that's you or someone that you love, know that the state of Illinois is fighting for you, and we won't stop until you have the support that you need. If you or a loved one need help, call the Illinois helpline for opioids and other substances at 833-234-6343. Let me say that again. If you or a loved one need help, call the Illinois helpline for opioids or substances other substances at 833-234-6343, or you can text HELP, H-E-L-P, to 833-234. One more time, you can text to HELP to 833-234. Thank you very much, everyone, for being here and joining us. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to the chair of the Governor's Opioid Overdose Prevention and Recovery Steering Committee and a true force of nature for equity in all that we do, Lieutenant Governor Juliana Stratton. Juliana?
Thank you, Governor. Hello, everyone. I am Lieutenant Governor Juliana Stratton, and I use she, her pronouns. Thank you, Governor Pritzker, for that warm introduction and for your commitment to protecting our most vulnerable through compassionate policymaking. I would also like to thank everyone joining us who is facing the opioid crisis head-on, including Attorney General Kwame Raoul, who has fought for Illinois communities harmed by this epidemic, Department of Human Services Secretary Grace Ho, who also co-chairs the Governor's Opioid Overdose Prevention and Recovery Steering Committee, all of our partners in the Illinois General Assembly, leaders, stakeholders, and advocates, all working to ensure there is access to resources and the tools so badly needed to save lives and help keep people safe. We are here today because members of our Illinois family are hurting across this state. Every city, town, and village has someone right now hurting because of the opioid crisis. This hurt has many forms, from chronic addiction to the stress of finding support to break the hold and remain on the road to recovery, to accessing services to heal the harm that families and friends feel because of their loved one's addiction. Illinois has gone far in our efforts to address the opioid crisis, not only because we recognize that all must stand up and act, but also because every voice impacted by the injustice and devastation it has caused deserves to be heard and supported. When we talk about harm reduction, we're really talking about a comprehensive response that equitably addresses the diverse needs of communities hurt by opioids. As co-chair of the Governor's Opioid Overdose Prevention and Recovery Steering Committee, I've seen just how widespread the harm is, as well as how deeply it has touched our most vulnerable. Opioid drug overdoses have become the leading cause of death nationwide for people under the age of 50. This crisis has reached into urban, suburban, and rural areas, every kind of community. It's also true that opioids have disproportionately hurt BIPOC communities. In fact, in Illinois alone, the opioid fatality rate for Black communities was 55.3 per 100,000, and that is the highest of all demographics. And it lays bare the deep inequities at the heart of this unspeakable amount of pain and trauma. We are here today because we will heal, and we'll do it by joining forces and working with the communities impacted to make the needed changes. As the governor said, the funds from the National Opioid Settlement Agreement coming to our state will support our efforts to build on the meaningful initiatives that we already have underway. I'm proud of the work of the Steering Committee and the Illinois Opioid Crisis Response Advisory Council in creating the State Overdose Action Plan. Alongside guidance from top agency leadership, community advocates, and elected leaders, the wisdom of members with lived experience helped craft the 25 priorities outlined in the plan. These priorities are centered on equity and addressing the systemic factors that lead to the addiction and overdose, and the executive order signed by the governor today will take us further in that mission. We are laser focused on the roots of the issue while still remaining steadfast in our response to the immediate needs brought on by the opioid epidemic, from access to life-saving medication to resources for recovery. There certainly is more work to do, and I'm honored to be in this space with so many who are ready to dig in. We have a pathway to safer, healthier Illinois, and we're taking everyone with us. Thank you, and now it's my honor to pass the mic along to a tireless advocate for Illinois communities who deserve justice, our Attorney General, Kwame Raoul.
Thank you, Madam Lieutenant Governor. Thank you, Governor, and thank you all who are here assembled. I'm pleased to be here today for another milestone in the state's ongoing work to combat and mitigate the opioid crisis here in Illinois. This is a crisis that has devastated families and communities in every corner, in every stopping point, in every municipality and in every county of our state. Since taking office 3.5 years ago, I've met with my colleagues from throughout the country on a whole host of issues, but there's no issue that we've met collectively on more so than combating the opioid crisis. And we've done so on a bipartisan basis, and I've got to tell you, some of these meetings have been testy at times, because this is a crisis that has truly devastated every corner in every state in our country. And so attorneys general were almost competitively advocating for resources going back to their respective states. And so that's why I took personal time to be engaged and to travel outside of the state for these negotiations. But each and every attorney general is only as good as their staff. And this, more so than any other issue, has demonstrated the commitment of my staff. I have with me today my Executive Deputy Attorney General Adam Braun and my Head of Consumer Protection, Susan Ellis. And I want to mention two other warriors, Andrea Law and Tom Verticchio, who spent countless of hours working on this. Accountability for entities that cause this epidemic must include resources for communities to help abate the crisis. And it must be equitable, because equity has to be at the heart of allocating these resources. I've also held collaborative bipartisan negotiations with state's attorneys representing counties throughout the state of Illinois as we prioritize this equitable framework for the distribution of resources throughout our great state. Today's announcement is a direct result of countless hours, and my office has dedicated seeking accountability and resources for the ongoing impact of opioid addiction in Illinois. In July of last year, we announced a $26 billion agreement with the country's 3 major pharmaceutical distributors and with Johnson & Johnson. As the governor mentioned, these settlements that have now been finalized will bring $760 million of resources over 18 years. In addition, Illinois is part of a national settlement to resolve opioid claims against pharmaceutical manufacturer Mallinckrodt. That deal was finalized in a bankruptcy plan that became effective last month, and it will provide approximately $1.75 billion in relief nationwide, and will bring $36 million to Illinois over 9 years. And just this week, I announced that we have reached agreements in principle on monetary amounts with manufacturers Teva and Allergan that, when finalized, will bring as much as $6.6 billion of additional relief to states across the country and local governments nationwide. Just as important as obtaining these resources to abate the crisis is making sure the resources are, again, distributed equitably. Even in instances where victims and survivors addiction have transitioned from a dependence on pharmaceutical opioids to illicit drug use. That's why my office negotiated the Illinois Opioid Allocation Agreement, again in a bipartisan manner, with state's attorneys representing counties throughout the state. Under this agreement, on which 94 counties and 77 municipalities have signed on. All counties and eligible municipalities can receive a direct distribution of funds from these and future settlements. It's important to highlight that abatement and remediation of the crisis is the primary goal of the settlements and the resources that come from this settlement. Unlike major settlements of the past, the vast majority of funds Illinois receives through these settlements will go towards a remediation fund. This fund will be used to pay for abatement programs throughout the state instead of being used to pay for other unrelated initiatives. Today's executive order is an important step in making sure these resources are used to address the crisis. In addition to creating a new office dedicated to utilizing resources obtained from these settlements, the governor's executive order establishes the advisory council that will ensure funding is distributed equitably across the state. The advisory council will provide recommendations regarding spending on abatement programs to the governor's steering committee. In making recommendations, the council will take not only population into account, but also rates of opioid usage, overdose deaths, and the amount of opioids shipped into each area of the state. I am proud that as a result of my office's diligence and negotiations, the Illinois Advisory Board will reflect the regional and racial diversity of our state. Members of the Advisory Council will come from a wide array of expertise and experience in fighting the opioid epidemic. The members will be representatives designated by both local governments and the state. The pain and devastation caused by the opioid crisis and opioid addiction in Illinois is not felt by any one region of the state or any one political party. It's felt by everybody. That is why I'm committed to continuing to work collaboratively and on a bipartisan basis within state and nationally to hold accountable those involved in creating and fostering our nation's opioid crisis. And I will continue to make sure that responsible parties provide resources to help us abate this ongoing crisis. And now I want to pass the mic on to Secretary Grace Howell of the Department of Human Services.
There I am. Thank you, Attorney General. Thank you, Governor Pritzker, Lieutenant Governor Stratton, members of the General Assembly and community members, advocates and association, Judd and Blanca, thank you for being here with us. Today represents an important moment in our state's fight against the opioid epidemic, which has deeply harmed and ended the lives of far too many neighbors, friends, and loved ones in Illinois and across the country. As has been explained, this fight is a continuation of our administration's commitment. And in fact, in March of 2020, our governor signed an executive order charging his state agencies and asking Lieutenant Governor Stratton to lead the development of the statewide overdose action plan, which was submitted to him this past March. Drug overdoses kill more than 100,000 people in the United States every day. Opioid-related deaths make up the majority of these tragedies. And in Illinois, in 2020, at the height of the COVID pandemic, overdose deaths due to opioid use increased by 33,000 to 3,000 lives lost. Almost 8 Illinois residents each day, which is more than motor vehicle fatalities as well as homicides, as also has been explained, disproportionately impacting non-Hispanic, Blacks, and male-identified individuals. As also explained, geographically speaking, there is no part of Illinois that is immune to this epidemic. As we know, many people who have developed an opioid use disorder started by taking prescription medications, misused them to continue controlling their pain, shifting to taking stronger opioids such as heroin, and now are exposed to illicit fentanyl, a synthetic opioid that is far more powerful and lethal. That's why today's opioid settlement plans and executive order are so critical. Let me share a little bit about how it will work. And the Department of Human Services is honored to be housing the office. We have in fiscal year 23 an appropriation of $108 million to begin the work of the deployment of the settlement agreement. As Attorney General outlined, there will be the development of an advisory board that we look forward to working with the Attorney General's office to quickly recruit and populate, and then begin as responsibly and as quickly as possible, begin deploying resources into communities, building upon the important current work that has been happening and also investing in additional strategies. The majority of the settlement funds will be used to support prevention and recovery from opioid addiction, and this may include an array of services and programs, including but not limited to medication-assisted recovery, prevention efforts, education, increased access to Narcan treatment programs, and the new office of the Opioid Settlement Administration at DHS will reside within the Division of Substance Use Prevention and Recovery, led by Laura Garcia. We are going to be recruiting a statewide opioid settlement administrator who will be appointed by the governor, and we will quickly begin this work to ensure that the settlement funds, number one, align with the state overdose action plan, and number two, are deployed as quickly and as responsibly as possible into the communities that have the highest rates of needs. My colleagues at DHS and across the sister agencies will do everything in our power to make sure that this effort succeeds. This means bringing people with lived experience from a variety of locations in Illinois with an array of diverse identities and experiences to help us direct investments in the best possible way. It is my pleasure at this time to introduce Anthony Allen, who is an outreach worker with HRDI, and I want to thank him for sharing his story with us so that others may find a similar path to recovery. Thank you. Anthony?
My name is Anthony Allen. I'm an employee of HRDI. I want to start by saying I used to use opioids. Matter of fact, I mainlined it. So I know what it's like for somebody to reach out to you with valid concern. I mean, I've been through the jails, the rehabs, been homeless. I want to talk about hope. When I was using, I thought that's how I was going to live the rest of my life. I thought I was going to die that way. I just didn't see no way out. People would tell me about methadone, but I didn't want that. I heard that would take my teeth out, deteriorate my bones. I just didn't want the methadone. While I was in the abandoned buildings, I lost my eyesight. I stayed in the hospital about a month and a half, trying to regain my sight. They wanted to do biopsies and all sorts of things to my eyes. That was frightening. I said, if I ever come from up under this, I'm done. Anyway, they was about to discharge me. I had a methadone addiction, so they sent me to HRDI. While I was at HRDI, my counselor suggested that because I kept using, so he suggested that I take what they call a blocker dose, a high dose, so if I do use, I wouldn't feel it. So after about a year, I noticed I wasn't buying opioids. I wasn't buying them. So I began to go into my neighborhood and talk to the people I used to use with. People, places, and things, that's a big deal, because eventually I relapsed. While I was out there, I ran into one of the counselors at HRDI, and they asked me, why don't I come back? And I told them I was ashamed to. They asked me, was I ashamed of what I was doing? So, a few days later, I went back to HRDI. And they got me back right. I stayed clean and still clean. I've been clean like 3 years now. As a matter, when they hired me as an outreach worker. That was right up my alley because I was already doing it. Except for, I had never been on 63rd and King Drive with my message. The places where I was going, it was like money, but 63rd and King Drive, that's a different world. It's dangerous. The guys that sell up there, they holler out rocks, blows, 2 for 10. I wait till they stop before I deliver my message. And I begin with HRDI, inpatient, outpatient, and I drag the methadone slow so they all can hear it and hang on to it. By the time I come back around, by me reaching out, they raise their hand and ask me to repeat what I just said. And some of them sign up, some of them don't. But I believe the ones I'm looking for is looking for me. I know that. So that's who I focus on, who give me eye contact. But that don't always work neither. They don't always complete it. I offer them, through HRD, offer them transportation to the program for the screening. I take them to the physical. I take them to the assessment. I didn't have them go to the screening, to the physical, and when it's time for them to be assessed and to drink, to get their process started, I've had them tell me they ain't ready. I had one guy tell me he a grown man, and he know when he ready or not. So I just go on about my business, but I let them know that HRDI is here for you, and I'll be back. And they be waiting, and they be waiting. When I come back, a lot of them come with me. Not only me, but some of the people I signed up, they doing very well. They working, some of them back at home with their families. And how I know, because they tell me that. They want to shake my hand. They be trying to give me money. They really do, be trying to buy me stuff. So I know they're grateful. Outreach workers are necessary. First of all, if I was still into it, if I had $10, $20, I'm not going to the rehab. I'm gonna go buy me a bag. And that's how a lot of them think. But when I show up with the ride, they say, okay, I do this. God sent you. And I agree with him, because he did. I want to talk about issues like the fentanyl. That's a sad situation. We know what the heroin will do. And we know we can help those that's using heroin. But the fentanyl, ain't no program for them. Ain't no program for them. They go through the physical, the screening, and when it's time for them to be assessed, they find out that they don't have heroin in their system, just fentanyl. And they get out of my car crying. And they go back out there and use, because ain't no help for fentanyl. And that needs to change. Because they dying. Not off heroin, they dying off fentanyl. People I know. Well, I want to thank Governor Pritzker and HRDI for allowing me to speak. It's my first time speaking, but outreach workers are important. We need to keep, matter of fact, we need to get more outreach workers so we can reach out to our communities. I just want to thank you.
Thank you, Alan. I want to build on your message of hope. Today is a day of hope. And I want to thank Attorney General Raoul for your fight. This will go down as one of your greatest deeds, Attorney General Raoul, and the people of Illinois should be proud of you as our Attorney General. So thank you very much, Attorney. You know, people watching today should feel that there is hope for people in our families that are struggling from a substance use disorder, because no matter who you are, we know someone that struggles with a substance use disorder. The facts tell us that every year 30,000 Illinoisans use heroin. 74,000 have an opioid use disorder, and nearly 400,000 misuse prescription opioids. Illinois, as Secretary Ho said, Illinois saw 2151 opioid-related deaths in the third quarter of 2020, 2,151, a 36% increase from 2019. And now the pandemic comes. The COVID-19 pandemic has generated a surge in heroin and opioid emergency department visits for overdose. Today, I tell you that the total economic and social cost of opioid use disorder and fatal overdose to the state of Illinois exceeds $41 billion annually, equating to about $600,000 for every Illinoisan with an opioid use disorder. So today's announcement of $26 billion is a help to make sure that people will be able to get the help that they need in Illinois. The old days of just telling people to just say no could be no more. We have to meet people where they are. We have to provide them with high quality care, make sure that they have housing, make sure that they have treatment for their opioid use disorder. This $26 billion settlement will help Illinois with that effort. Secretary Ho, I should tell you, thank you very much for always coming to the west side of Chicago, where we have the heroin highway, where so many people are dying in Garfield Park. And any chance I get to be able to speak to families to let them know that help is underway, I take advantage of it. And the governor's done a lot as it relates to this issue. One thing that he probably forgot to tell you is something else that he led, and that is that in Illinois, you can receive Narcan at the pharmacy without a prescription. So everyone in Illinois could go to a pharmacist, present their insurance card, whether it's Medicaid or private, and request a Narcan kit. And I urge everyone to do that, because there's a standing order in Illinois that allows it to happen through the Department of Public Health. So thank you very much for having this today, and thank you for the executive order, Governor. And now the mic is back with Governor Pritzker.
Thank you, Representative Ford, and thanks to everybody who's here today, especially to Anthony for telling your story. There's so much in that for all of us, I think, to unpack and try to help you address and help the people who are suffering across our state address, and I really appreciate it. Before I take questions today, I want to address the latest development in Illinois' burgeoning cannabis industry. 28 additional dispensary licenses were awarded this morning, all awarded to social equity applicants. For far too long, government policies did extraordinary damage to communities, destroying families and filling prisons with nonviolent offenders, a burden that fell disproportionately on Black and brown communities. In Illinois, we addressed this history head on as we legalized cannabis for recreational use. To date, over $113 million in funding from cannabis sales has been returned to communities impacted by the war on drugs through our Restore, Reinvest, and Renew program, whose chair is standing behind me, our great Lieutenant Governor, Juliana Stratton. Nearly 800,000 convictions and arrest records have been cleared and expunged. These are low-level cannabis convictions and arrest records that have been expunged. And as of today, nearly 200 new businesses in Illinois are 100% owned and operated by individuals directly harmed by the war on drugs, with more businesses to come. There's nothing else like that in the world, let alone the entire United States, though I am proud that our work has inspired other states to try to emulate our mission. While there's more work to be done, these licenses represent a significant step toward accountability for the decades of injustice preceding cannabis legalization. We will never be able to fully remedy the depth of the damage that was done, but here in Illinois, we can govern with the courage to right the wrongs of the past, and I am intent on ensuring Illinois continues to deliver on our promises, putting equity at the forefront of this process. So thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions from members of the media. Hello, Mary
I have
Ann.
an on-topic, believe it or not.
Great, oh my goodness, Mary Ann, yeah.
Oh, I do have a couple off-topic.
Okay, wouldn't be you, Mary Ann.
How, could you just explain, and maybe it's, I'm not sure who does it, or would explain it, but, so is this geared to communities, or is this also talking about a person? How does someone access the financial support? Or are you talking mainly about spreading this money to communities to make sure that they then decide?
Maybe Secretary Ho and the Attorney
And
General.
then what about those who might be, afraid to come forward?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So the executive order will establish a board that will be comprised of folks, leaders, representatives from all parts of the state that will then make recommendations to the steering committee that me, Lieutenant Governor, and the IDPH Director chair for final recommendations to be discussed with the Attorney General. But as we had shared, there's actually a robust group of organizations already that provide these services all across the state. We released in March the statewide overdose action plan that has, many different strategies that are already actually underway, and then there are also some strategies that will have yet to be deployed. So we have a framework of how these funds could be invested. And of course, we want to get more feedback from experts and people who are actually doing the work on the ground. So to specifically answer your question, most of the individuals who are suffering from OUD would go to their community-based organization, either through folks like Anthony Allen, through outreach workers, or they could be referred from hospitals or other organizations in their communities for treatment. So, I would say that the HRDIs of this state have been doing amazing work, and under our administration, we've increased resources to those organizations. But we also know that there are gaps in service in different parts of the state, as well as available treatment in different parts of the state. And as discussed, we're going to use the data to help lead the way to figuring out what other strategies as well as investments need to be made in certain corners of the state.
Thank you. Did anybody else want to address that, or just?
The only thing I'll say is part of the negotiations on a national basis, it's mandated that we referred to it as buckets as we were negotiating, that there's a 70% amount that is mandated to go towards abating the crisis, whereas if you think of historical settlements like the tobacco settlement, there was flexibility in how you spend the money, and then there was a 15% that would go towards local governments and 15 to the state. But to be clear, virtually, you know, the vast majority of the dollars will go towards abating the problem, and then these programs will have to be approved, and so there's a lot of checkpoints to make sure that these resources are going both at the state level as well as part of the overall settlement to make sure that the resources go towards abating the problem.
How soon will that money start flowing out to the organizations, or when
To the well, the money has started.
Our first payments will come in the next weeks. First payments.
Yeah.
do you have a ability to give those to organizations? It sounds like you.
Well, it will go through the process. It will go
So
through
that
the.
process would start in a year, a couple months.
So we have $108 million in appropriation authority, and as been discussed, we don't have the cash behind that appropriation yet, but upon signing the executive order by the governor, we're going to work with the Attorney General's office to begin the composition of the advisory board, and so we hope to have our first meeting in September, and we hope to begin deploying some initial funds in October, but we want to honor the commitment that we've made to make sure that we're listening to stakeholders and that we get feedback from the advisory board. And so as I'd shared, we have a foundation of organizations that are already providing these services to Illinois residents in the state. So we believe that we could present some initial recommendations for investments that could be quickly deployed, but then we want to take the time, right, to make sure that we're investing them in the right areas for the long term. So we hope to have the first meeting up and running in September with initial funds out in October or November.
And I'm going to add just two words, or a couple words to that, which is that what she's talking about, what Grace is talking about in terms of long-term investments, is thinking about, you know, the fact that we just don't have enough residential beds, for example, in the state to cover the many, many people who need help. We don't have enough people who are doing the work that Anthony's doing, and so we've got to make sure that there's more training available, that we're recruiting more, and so on. And so these are all long-term strategies, but the short-term is we have some terrific organizations, frankly, in the state that are already doing this work, and they would be initial recipients of funds, no doubt.
So the money could be used in that respect, up beds and more workers.
Indeed, over the long haul, and that's really going to be up to the committee, you know, as it gets its work going in September and going forward. Yeah.
So, Governor, could you talk about, of course, the DPI chair? Has it been worth it, the infighting? And if you do get your choice, as it does appear that Lisa Hernandez will be the next DPI chair, described as a Madigan loyalist, does this choice mean more dark money for the party? And is that the way you want to go?
Well, you really threw 7 things in there. Let's just start with the fact that the Democratic Party of Illinois, as you know, for many years didn't really operate the way that most parties, state parties, operated, right? It was under one person's control. It really was, the money was really used for the most part for one house of the General Assembly, and that's not how state parties normally operate. And so with the changing of the guard there, you know, the hope was that that would free the organization to do the things that it really needs to do across the state, building field organizations, for example, and lifting up the Democratic Party in areas of the state where really Democrats have been sort of forgotten. But there are plenty of Democrats, but they just need some organizational help. So the purpose of the new Democratic Party, with the old leadership out of the way, was to effectuate that. The challenge was, and I've said this all along, is that a federal office holder, just under the federal law, can't raise dollars or spend dollars for state races of any sort, and that means up and down the ballot county board races and state rep and state senate and attorney general races and comptroller races and so on. Can't raise or spend any money if the leader is a federal office holder. There was we had a congresswoman who ran and won that spot in March of 2021, despite that impediment, and proved, unfortunately, over the last 16, 17 months that was in fact the case, and that trying to work around it wasn't working. So that was really the purpose, was just to try to free up the party to raise and spend dollars appropriately in this new era for the Democratic Party of Illinois. And so when you ask, is it worth it? Look, what we're looking to accomplish, I think all of us who care about the Democratic Party, is to make sure that we have representation from all the diverse constituencies, and making sure that we have leadership that can accomplish the goals that we want to set out to do, which is to beat Republicans and make sure that the party is doing what it needs to do. One more thing, Marianne, and I'll turn it back to you. Which is so that's why Lisa Hernandez, who is the candidate who's running for the chairperson, has reached out to offer this idea of a federal chair for Robin Kelly, who has been the party chair for the last 16, 17 months, have her be the federal chair, which legally, if you create the position, you can do, and then have a state party chair that is not a federal office holder, which will allow you to raise and spend money.
But you also, this allows the party to take in more dark money. Is that the right?
Oh, no. First of all, that is a Republican talking point. This idea, no, that is a Republican talking. Even if someone else says it, it's a Republican talking point, because the dark money, you're using that word, that just isn't a thing. It's no, in the Democratic Party of Illinois, the Democratic Party of Illinois is not raising any dark money. You've seen that. Robin Kelly took over. That's not something that anybody was looking to do. That's not something that the party is looking to do. That is a Republican talking point.
All right, last question.
I have a question from Center Square first for the Attorney General, if you don't mind.
From what? That's a right-wing organization. You're actually carrying their questions for them?
Hey, I'm a reporter. I brought
But
the questions.
but you're an independent reporter with a real news organization. All right, I'll turn it over to the Attorney General.
Don't blame the messenger, please. Why did you forward the Thornley work compensation fraud case to the appellate prosecutor's office instead of prosecuting it yourself? What's the conflict within your office handling that case?
Well, I'll take you through there's an employee who made allegations with regards to sexual harassment. In that case, we become the lawyer for the state, and so we're engaged in adverse to the person making the allegations. After an investigation, it's revealed that there's potential for fraud from that employee. It will look like retaliation if you're prosecuting the person that you're adverse to. So it's your typical conflict, which is common. We get cases referred to our office from state's attorneys where there's a conflict. Throughout the state, we do murder cases, we do all sorts of cases if there's a conflict. It's nothing unusual. Let me go on with that, because this is just something that is made out of nothing by somebody who's running for office who knows nothing about the office or nothing about how government works. It's been alleged that CMS got involved in a workers' compensation claim for an employee that wasn't an employee of CMS. Newsflash, CMS handles risk management for all state employees, whether or not they work directly for CMS. So this is a nothing burger. A nothing burger.
All right, thanks everyone.
Thank you.